Okay. All right, we've been teaching kids they're nothing but an animal, and today a lot of them are acting like animals, and I think there's a strong connection between what we're telling them and how they view their life. What is Jeffrey Dahmer, that killed how many people? Jeffrey Dahmer, the mass murderer. He watched my videotapes in prison and got saved before they killed him. And he said, you know, I thought I was just an animal. I didn't think there was any God to answer to. That is evolution teaching that made him do what he did. So, Bible says, he that sinneth against his own soul, he wrongeth his own soul. They that hate me love death. And our culture is so full of death these days. Kids are taught today there are no absolutes. I had an atheist one time tell me, he said, there are no absolutes. I said, are you absolutely sure? He said, that's not fair. I said, that's perfectly fair. How can you be absolutely sure there's no absolutes? Huh? Thus saith the Lord. Now that's absolute. That's how you decide right and wrong. What does God say about it? The Bible says don't make any cuttings in your flesh and don't print any marks upon you. Some people either don't know or maybe they just don't care what God says. But God says don't do that. So the Bible says your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. So it belongs to Him. You let Him decide what you do with it. But many teachers blindly follow the textbook, not realizing it's perfectly fine for you to teach creation in a public school. I speak in public schools all the time. There's never been a law banning the teaching of creation or banning the Bible in public schools. Never been a law. Teachers can teach creation in the science classroom if they want. They've always been allowed to. Here's what happened. Arkansas and Louisiana both passed laws, listen carefully, requiring creation to be taught. The court struck it down. They said you cannot require that creation be taught. They didn't say you can't teach it. They just said you can't make it mandatory. If your state passed a law that said you are required to breathe, well, the court would probably strike it down. No, you're not required to breathe. You probably will if we leave you alone for a while, but you can't require that. No statute, this is from Stephen Gould, an atheist. No statute exists in any state to bar instruction in creation science. It could be taught before and it can be taught now. After the court case, they just simply said you can't make it mandatory. But the ACLU, the American Communist Lawyers Union, tried to make it look like you can't teach creation in schools, and they're lying through their teeth. You can teach creation. But if a teacher tells the kid, okay kid, you started like a slime and you slowly evolved to a human, you got to realize that teaching is going to destroy the kid's faith in the Bible. And the Bible says anybody who ruins a child's faith be better off with a millstone hanged about his neck and drowned in the depths of the sea. The Bible says don't be many masters, knowing we shall receive the greater condemnation. Here's what happened though. Back in the 60s, there was very little evolution in the textbooks. It just wasn't much. In 1963, it jumped up to 33,000 words. What happened in the early 60s? Well, it's pretty simple. The Russians beat us in the space race. How many remember that? When they launched Sputnik first, and Americans panicked. Whoa, they're ahead of us in the space race. Life magazine, how you can survive a fallout. Build a bomb shelter in your backyard. Taught them how to build bomb shelters. This was in the early 60s. Then in 1959, it was the 100-year anniversary of Charlie Darwin's book coming out. And so some people in America said, you know, the Soviets are ahead of us in science because they teach evolution. We've got to get more evolution into the schools. So President Eisenhower asked Congress for $1 billion to push more evolution in the schools. There's an article about that called Scientists in the Classroom, where they began in the early 60s pushing more evolution into the schools. And by 1963, it was 33,000 words about evolution. 1962 is when Madalyn Murray O'Hair had her case to get prayer out of the schools. Now, the case was only about mandatory prayer. Never about, you can still pray in schools, and kids do before every test, I'm sure. But what happened in 63, though, was tragic in our country. That's when we started to see a tremendous rise in premarital sex for every age group. We saw a great rise in sexually transmitted diseases for kids 10 to 14 years old. we saw a great rise in unwed birth rates. 100% increase in birth rates for 10 to 14-year-olds. 553% increase in pregnancies. The difference is being aborted, murdered. Been an incredible rise in out-of-wedlock births. Now, as of 2012, 40.7% of the kids born are to a couple that are not married. What's that do to that kid growing up in a home like that? Fatherless homes account for 53% of teen mothers, 63% of youth suicides, 85% of kids going to prison because they weren't raised with natural mom and natural dad. Paul said to Timothy, Timothy was a great preacher in the Bible, but Timothy's mom and dad never should have been married. His mother was a Jew, his father was a Greek. Well, the Jews weren't supposed to marry anybody who's not a Jew. But his parents disobeyed, Timothy is the result, and God used Timothy in a great way. So listen carefully. If your parents messed up and did something dumb, you shut your mouth, quit your whining, and go serve God with your life. God can still use you, no excuses. Unmarried couples living together has increased 725%. Now, according to 2010, 7.5 million unmarried couples live together, 15 million people in America. The Bible says, thou shalt not commit adultery. Whoremongers and adulterers, God will judge. Paul said, and Jesus said in Matthew, if you even look on a woman and lust after her, you've already committed adultery in your heart. By the way, girls, that's why it's important how you dress, okay? My daddy would say, if you're not in business, don't advertise. All right. Divorce rates have gone crazy in this country. Now, in early 50s is when it began to, or 50s to 60s when it spiked, then it began to drop off because people just didn't bother getting married anymore. That's what happened. As of 2014, 48.8 cases of child abuse, up 2,300%. Child abuse. Illegal drug use up 6,000%. Violent crimes up nearly 1,000%. Brother, I'm not that old, but I remember the days when you go to high school and half the pickup trucks had a loaded rifle hanging in the back window because the kids are going to go hunting after school. How many know what I'm talking about? That's exactly correct. And nobody got shot in school in those days, did they? Number of people killed in school shootings is the red line. The number of shootings is the yellow line. Guess when it started going up? Early 60s. We started telling the kids they're an animal. They're acting like animals. This map shows just the school shootings in 2013. We're telling them they're an animal. You know why the kids did the shooting at Columbine High School in Colorado? Well, let's see. Kleinbold's father was a geologist. They were both followers of Nazi teaching. Eric's t-shirt said natural selection. They asked Cassie, do you believe in God? She said, yep, bang, shot her on the spot. Now, blaming guns for what happened at Columbine is stupid. It's not the gun's fault, okay? Blaming guns for Columbine is like blaming spoons for Rosie O'Donnell being fat. Okay, it's not the spoon's fault, okay? Gee whiz. SAT scores have dropped off radically since the early 60s. They finally had to dumb down the test. They made the test easier, so the scores would go back up. SAT scores at the lowest level in 10 years. So guess what the educators think is the solution? More money. That's all they can see. More money. No. Quit teaching them they're an animal. Teen suicide rate's gone crazy. Now it's up 12.6 per 100,000. Kids kill themselves. Suicide rates for that, we got stuff to go forever. If I told you, if you kissed a frog, it would turn to a prince. You'd say, no, Brother Hovind, frogs don't turn to princes. Oh, they do in the textbook. Yes, boys and girls, we started off like an amoeba. And we slowly evolved to a frog and very slowly became a prince. It's the same fairy tale. But see, if the frog turns to the prince quickly, we all know it's a fairy tale. But if the frog turns to the prince slowly, now that's modern science. Just as much a fairy tale. The solution, boys and girls, if you want to turn your frog to a prince, a kiss won't do it. What you have to have is billions and billions of years. How many have ever seen that in a textbook before? Billions of years ago, millions of years ago. I ask teachers, I say, now, were you there? Well, no. Now, do you know the earth is billions of years old? Is this really part of science? You can't observe it, study it, test it, demonstrate it. You can believe it. So technically, it's not part of science. It's part of a religion. Now, it's true that a lot of folks believe in evolution, but more folks believe in creation. Depends on what part of the country. CBS News ran an article, said 51% believe God made the world in the last 10,000 years. Only about 10% are atheistic. Now that's increased a little bit. More than 4 in 10 Americans believe in creationism. But look at the way they phrase the question to get their side to go up. The percentage of people who believe that humans evolved under God's guidance dropped from 38 to 31%. The figures rose from 9 to 19%, listen carefully, for people who don't believe that God had anything to do with evolution. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Suppose I asked you a question. Did God have anything to do with evolution? That's a trick question. The way they phrase the question makes the number invalid. Do you think God had anything to do with evolution? The atheist is going to say no, because he doesn't believe in God. And the Christian is going to say no, because he doesn't believe in evolution. They're going to count them both for their side, aren't they? Yeah. Not a survey. Survey 1994 said 46% of adults believe in creation. This is startling because evolution's been a settled issue for 150 years. Well, in their mind it has. Most scientists believe in evolution, slightly more than half, I agree. That doesn't make it true. The scientists used to teach the planets go around the Earth. Not true. They used to teach a big rock will fall faster than a little rock. Not true. They used to teach if you're sick, you have bad blood. Take out your blood and you'll get better. There were special places around the country to have your blood taken out. They had a sign out front. It was a pole with a red stripe around it. That's the guy that's got the razor blade. You feeling sick? Got a headache? Here, take some blood out. Okay. That's how George Washington died. They bled him 3 times. That's what they taught. That's what they thought. They were trying to help the poor guy. And they killed him. The Bible said the life of the flesh is in the blood. Now listen, if you went scuba diving and you found a treasure chest full of gold coins, and I asked you the very simple question, when did the boat sink? You say, I don't know. Well, look at the dates on the coins. If there's a coin in there from 1750, you ought to be able to figure out, you know, the boat had to sink after 1750. How many can figure that out with no help? It couldn't sink before that, right? You don't poke around in the box and find the oldest coin. You find the youngest coin. And that's called the limiting factor. If you find a dinosaur bone, you should notice 2 things about it immediately. Number 1, it does not talk. Number 2, it does not have a date stamped on it. It does not say made by a dinosaur in 70 million BC in Taiwan. So, how would you tell the age of a dinosaur bone? How do you tell the age of the earth? The Bible says in the beginning God created it, so I bet God knows how old it is. And he told us Jesus created everything according to Colossians. That's one of the many verses that proves Jesus is God Almighty in the flesh. So Jesus created it, so he ought to know. And Jesus said, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? Oh, well then when he made Adam and Eve, that was the beginning. Mark 10:6 says, from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Well, that makes it pretty simple, because the Bible says death came into the world because of man's sin. By man came death. In Adam all die. You see, man brought death into the world, and Adam was the first man. It couldn't be more clear in Scripture. And Eve is the mother of all living. It's clearly spelled out. And Adam was 130 when Seth was born. And Seth was 105 when Enos was born, and Enos was 90 when his son was born. If you put them all together on a chart, I got these laminated out there for placemats on the table. That makes a great chart. If you add up all the dates given in the Bible, it comes to about 4000 BC. Now, I'm not one of these guys that tries to put an exact date on it and say it's 4004 BC, October 23rd at 2 in the afternoon. I don't try to do that. I do believe I know why God, I do think Adam was made in the afternoon, because it was just before Eve. And I think I figured out why God made Adam first. I think God made Adam first because he didn't want any advice on how to do it. No, God, you're doing it wrong. Eve, go stand over there. I can handle this, okay? I was telling a whole bunch of Adam and Eve jokes one time. I know a bunch of them. And this one lady said, "And where would you men be without us women?" I said, "In the Garden of Eden." Cain and Abel and Adam are walking by the garden one day, and Cain said, "Hey, Dad, why don't we live in there?" He said, "We used to, son, but your mother ate us out of house and home." Anyway, BC means before Christ. They've now changed it in all the textbooks to say BCE, before the Common Era. So here the textbook says the earth is billions of years old. The Bible clearly says the creation of Adam was the beginning. Well, that means Jesus was lying, or he didn't understand modern science, or maybe he was right. How old is this earth? In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Thou, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth. How old is this earth anyway? Did you know there are nearly 100 scientific ways to prove the earth cannot be billions of years old? And our time is up. We'll cover those. Get my video number 1, and I go through about 30 of them. Scientific ways to show this earth cannot possibly be billions of years old. But if you take away billions of years from the formula, evolution collapses in a heap. And they hate it when you do that. So, I do it. All right, break time. Question answer time. That was, well, I got 2 more minutes, but we'll start up question answer time. Any questions, fair game?
This is the way we'll do the format again. If you want to come up and you want to ask a question, you get in line, and we'll do that. I've got some that were written. We've got some written questions, and I'll share those as they've done. If you don't want to come here, but you still have a question, you can find on the pew somewhere one of those cards. Just slip it to me, and we'll slip it in the pile, and we'll get those, because I believe we can get to every one of them that's been asked so far. Okay. So we'll let me begin with some of the written questions that were done. Are we hot here? White? Yeah, there we go. All right. And again, if you have a question, just slide in. If not, we'll go with the ones we have. All right. Let's do with number 1. That sounds like a good one, right? Good place to start. Okay. The first question is: how is it possible that Earth's surface features, like that of the United States Grand Canyon, could have been formed in a few thousand years, or were such parts of Earth's was this part of Earth's original formation? Okay. I have over 7,000 slides. It really helps if you ask the questions in the same order that I already have the answers. On my seminar part 4, it's 2.5 hours long, that one DVD. It's called Lies in the Textbooks. And this opens up here. So I give a long answer on seminar part 4. Let me get it up here as quick as I can. Grand Canyon is an amazing thing. I flew over it last week, preaching out that way, or 2 weeks ago, whenever. I love studying Grand Canyon, been rafting in it, etc. Amazing hole in the ground. But Grand Canyon probably formed in a couple weeks. Could not possibly be formed by the Colorado River, and I'll show you. Grand Canyon, right here, slide number 65. Okay. The textbooks will say, over millions of years, the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon from solid rock. Typical propaganda. No, not true. Grand Canyon is a washed out spillway. Many lakes all over the world have washed out a section of the dam. It doesn't wash away the whole dam. It finds the lowest point or the weakest point and whoosh, drains it right there, right? That's what Grand Canyon is. You see, kids, it's a fact Grand Canyon exists. It is not a fact it took millions of years. There are 2 theories about this. The atheist says, well, it formed slowly by a little water and lots of time. No, it formed quickly by lots of water and a little bit of time. And the atheists are always trying to erase that line and make their theory part of the fact when it's not part of the fact. Colorado River cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. This is what they teach. Do you look? This guy said,
You look back a few hundreds of millions of years. No, you don't. You look down in a hole in the ground. When I was down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon in the raft, it was the same date down there that it was at the top. Think about it for 5 minutes. You're not looking back through time, you're looking down in a big hole. Okay. If you built a dam across Grand Canyon, that would take a lot of dirt, by the way, but if you did, a giant lake would back up. Some of the water from Wyoming drains through the Grand Canyon. Has a huge drainage pattern. There's Grand Canyon right there. Okay. I've loved studying Grand Canyon, flown over it many times, studied it, taught earth science for 15 years. This is one of my favorite topics. I was in a debate with an atheist, and he said, Hovind, it took millions of years to make Grand Canyon. I said, oh, sir, no, no, no. This white stripe across the middle here, between these two red lines, is what's called the snow line. That's the high elevation. The river cuts right across there. It's about 270 miles long. Well, the top of this ridge, this snow line, is 7,000 or 8,000 feet high. The river starts cutting the canyon over here at Page, Arizona, where it's 2,800 feet above sea level. That's where the canyon starts. Cuts right across that ridge, comes out the other side at Las Vegas, Nevada, where it's only 1,800 feet above sea level. Now you can't see this with a 270-mile river and a 1-mile rise. 1 mile over 270 kind of disappears, unless you do it in a schematic view. The river starts cutting the canyon at 2,800 foot elevation. The ridge is 7,000 or 8,000 feet high. The rivers don't flow uphill in Arizona or Alabama or anywhere. Grand Canyon is a washed out spillway. It happens to be the biggest one in the world, but that's what it is. If you, I asked this professor, I said, sir, let me get you to consider a couple things here. Did you know the top of Grand Canyon is higher than the bottom? He said, well, yeah. I said, did you know the river only runs through the bottom? He said, yeah. I said, sir, did you know the top is higher than where the river enters the canyon by 4,000 feet? Did you know rivers don't flow uphill? Sir, there's no delta. Where's all the mud that washed out of there? It's clear out in the Pacific Ocean. We make a little model of Grand Canyon that the kids can do at Dinosaur Adventureland. They fill it full of water and make a sand dam out of it and washes it out in seconds. If you filled in Grand Canyon, 2 great big lakes would fill in behind it. Grand Lake and Hopi Lake. Cover half of Utah and part of Colorado. That book, In the Beginning, by Walt Brown is fabulous. One you definitely need for your library if you're going to study this. Well, if you built a dam across the canyon, a great big lake would fill in behind it. What happened, probably 100 years after Noah's flood, just my guess, it got too deep from water runoff, rain. And any farmer that's ever had a lake get too deep will tell you it'll wash out the dam in a flash. It started at the Las Vegas, Nevada side and ate its way backwards like all reach dams do. When a lake flows over, it starts at the far side and eats its way backwards. There have been how many washed out spillways in the history of humanity? Like thousands. The lake on our property is washed out twice before we got it. 9-acre lake drained in minutes. Washed out. It happens all the time. Ask anybody who works on the county road department how bad of a problem this is. building things to handle floods. It doesn't wash away the whole dam. St. Louis had a reservoir to hold water. It found the weak spot and broke in 2005. It lost 1.5 billion gallons of water in 10 minutes. Carved out a slot down the side of the mountain in 10 minutes. Grand Canyon is one of those. Canyons all over the world are like that. The river flows down here. Obviously, it had to start cutting way up here. Must have been a giant lake back behind it. So, it's interesting to look at Grand Canyon. Rivers all over the world come together and join to make bigger rivers. But when they join, they almost always join at what's called acute angles less than 90 degrees. If you look at the south side of Grand Canyon, the rivers join and keep going the same general direction, a less than 90-degree angle. But on the north side, the rivers go backwards. It flows backwards, hits the main channel, turns around, and comes back out. These are called barbed canyons. Well, how could you do that? Very simple. As the lake is draining, the water runs off the backside into the main channel and turns around and comes back out. I don't know of another way to explain the barbed canyons at Grand Canyon. This is on the backside of the dam as it's draining. So, when the textbook says Colorado River cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years, you tell them Kent Hovind said they're lying. That's lie number 1 of my 30 lies in the textbooks on video number 4. Okay? Thank you, sir.
I actually got 3 questions about the same topic, and it's about carbon dating, radiocarbon dating. And of course, I know there's also other ways that the scientists use to say they prove evolution, to show that it's true. Can you talk a little bit about this reliability and whether it's realistic or unrealistic?
Okay, I have a brand new 2-hour DVD on carbon dating. I moved all 400 slides into the new presentation. My laptop crashed. This is the laptop they gave me for this trip, and I forgot to move them onto here. So, sorry about that. I don't have the slides on carbon dating. It's in a different folder and I forgot to move it. But carbon dating was invented after World War II, 1947, with Willard Libby at the University of Chicago. He got a Nobel Prize for it. It's based on the assumption that the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, carbon-14, in the atmosphere is consistent, and has been for a long time. We know it's not. It takes a long time and a technical answer for that, so if you could watch my video on carbon dating, I think we've got it on the table, but it's a 2-hour presentation at Mississippi State University I did a few months ago on the topic. It has never worked. There are 6 different ways that they try to date things, I think 6. Carbon-14 to carbon-12, potassium to argon, rubidium to strontium, lead-208 to lead-206. They all are based on the assumption, A, we can know the initial content, which you can't. B, we know the rate's always been the same, which we can't. C, we know it's never been contaminated. You can't know any of those. They date living penguins, have been carbon dated at 8,000 years old. They're still alive. They took a snail in a laboratory in Tennessee, broke a piece off the shell, carbon dated it 27,000 years old while the snail's crawling around on the table. It doesn't work. Never worked. Okay?
Next question is, within our faiths, it's estimated that about 10% of current Christians that attend church also believe that the earth is 10 million years old. What is your opinion of that?
Well, they need to come to my seminar. I believed it's millions of years old for the first 15 years of my Christian life. I wish I had known this stuff 20 years earlier. Would have saved me a lot of headaches. It's sad, I think, that Christians do that because I don't think they realize they're calling Jesus a liar. And God wrote on a rock with his own finger the 10 Commandments and gave that to Moses, right? He wrote on there, in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. What do you suppose he meant by that? He did it in 6 days. Could not be more clear, written by his own finger on a rock. And so there's no way a slow creation is going to evolve and work. So many millions of animals depend upon each other, called a symbiotic relationship. We could go 2 days on that topic, but the yucca moth lays its eggs on the yucca cactus. And the yucca cactus can only get pollinated by the yucca moth. So here you got a moth and a cactus totally dependent on each other. Well, which one evolved first? And how did it live without the other one? Termites chew on wood and swallow it, but they can't digest it. They've got little critters in their intestines. You talk about tiny. They're called flagellated paramecium. They digest the cellulose. Those critters can't live outside the termite, and the termite cannot live without them critters. Which one evolved first? It goes on and on with symbiotic relationships. Cannot be explained evolution. Okay? I'm sorry I don't have those slides.
All right, next question is, how do both Bible and science explain the development of such a diverse and well-formed collection of languages, spoken and written?
Well, the Bible explains the languages very simply. God confused them and confounded them at the Tower of Babel, Genesis chapter 10 and 11. How evolution explains it, I've never had anybody give a good explanation for that. Why aren't we all speaking the same language? I should ask one sometime. I've never had one answer the question. Don't know.
This question involves fossils that were titled Lucy. Could you explain how that came to be and why the scientists use that to prove evolution?
I don't understand that one. The fossils of what now?
Lucy.
Oh, Lucy. Okay. On video number 2, which I won't have time to cover this trip, if you get video 2, I talk about the so-called cavemen right here. Let's see. All of the so-called cavemen. You know, is it possible for an ape-like creature to turn to a human? Maybe so. It depends what you mean by caveman. There are many people that live in caves today, okay? There's the world's most wanted caveman. There's a former caveman right there. So there have always been people that live in caves. And I cover, a specific question was about Lucy. I have about 30 minutes of all of the so-called cavemen. Nebraska man was built from one tooth. All they had was a tooth. They found out later it's a tooth from a pig. Let's see. Dawn man, Piltdown man, Neanderthal man. There's a great book on the topic if you want. Buried Alive by Jack Cuozzo. Fabulous book on so-called cavemen. Lucy is an interesting one. Coming up right here, Lucy. Found by Donald Johansen in 1974, Hadar Valley, Ethiopia. He found it 2 weeks before his grant money ran out. They said, you better find something or no more money. Oh, okay, he found something. He found 40% of the skeleton. They named it Lucy because they were listening to the Beatles' rock and roll song that was popular back then, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, LSD. Yeah. They show the skull looking half human, half ape, but very little of the skull was found. The knee, they said the knee is angled. The knee joint is the femur comes off the knee at an angle. Oh, okay. And they'll say apes have a straight knee. So this is their big thing, their proof that Lucy is a missing link. I said, well guys, there's a couple things you ought to consider. First of all, an angled femur does not prove Lucy's becoming a human. Most apes have a straight, the femur and tibia and fibia and patella is all in a straight line, I understand. And man's is angled out to the side because your hips are wider than your knees, or you can't walk very well. But tree climbing monkeys have an angled femur. So angled femur does not prove it's becoming a human. They say Lucy's knee was slightly bigger than a regular ape. Okay. The bones of a Clydesdale are slightly bigger than a regular horse, too. Does that prove it's becoming an elephant or a truck? No, it's just bigger, that's all. There are some big horses and little horses today. None of the foot bones were found for Lucy, absolutely none. Not a single one. But they put human feet on the display. How do you know it had human feet? That we could talk for a lot. They found normal human footprints in the ash. But they said, well, this ash is 3.75 million years old. So it can't be a human, even though they're normal human footprints. The form of his foot was exactly the same as ours. Whoa. They look like, they studied 70 people that go barefoot all their life, some tribe someplace in the jungle. And their footprint was exactly like the ones found in the ash. So they said, if we didn't know these footprints were so old, we'd think a human walked here. How do you know they're so old? They don't. The National Geographic put a ape-like creatures with human footprints making them. It's insane. And why did they add the toe separation? Well, because the ape's toe sticks out to the side, so he can grab a tree branch. You can't grab a tree branch with your foot. If you want to practice, start on a low branch, okay? But there they are again, giving all kinds of normal human feet to all of these so-called ape-like creatures. I point out, I say, guys, if you find bones in the dirt, all you know is it died. You couldn't prove those bones had any children. You sure couldn't prove they had children that were different. You couldn't prove they had children that lived. Why would you think a bone in the dirt can do something no animal today can do? Produce something other than its kind. There are simply no exceptions. Every farmer in the world counts on evolution not happening. They crossbreed their cows, they expect to get a cow. So far, that's all that's ever happened. If you know of an exception, let me know. But why can it happen long ago and far away, and it can't happen today? I'd like to watch it this time. That would be science. So Lucy is a lie. It's a 3-foot-tall chimpanzee-type animal, and probably some still alive. Australopithecines might still be alive in Sumatra or in the islands of Indonesia. So very possibly still alive. If not, worst case scenario, it's an extinct species of ape. That's all. Okay.
This question comes from a parent that says, "Brother, I have 3 kids that are here tonight. What advice would you give them as they state the case of evolution and religion as a religion as they go to public school?"
It's a shame we have to send kids off to war. The parents ought to be fixing this problem. Okay? I think rather than try to get evolution out of the textbooks, the parents ought to be getting lies out of the textbooks. Don't even mention the word evolution. You send me the textbook they're using, I'll point out the lies and say, get this removed. I spoke at the Arkansas House Representatives committee that was selecting textbooks for Arkansas years ago. And I showed 30 or 40 lies in the textbooks. They're going to tell you that the humans have a tailbone, and that's proof we used to have a tail. I said, hold it. There are 9 little muscles at the end of your sacral column that special muscles attach to. And without those muscles, you cannot do some valuable things. I won't tell you what they all are, but you need them. I said, if you think the tailbone is vestigial, I will pay to have yours removed. You will very quickly realize, whoa, that was a mistake. Don't do that, okay? They give examples. So I went through 30 lies in the textbooks that they were just about to vote on. Which book? I think somebody ought to say, look, I don't want my kids taught a lie. If you found a textbook in your school that said 2 + 2 is 5, what would you do? Do the same thing with evolution. After I got done showing the 30 lies in the textbooks they were about to vote on, a a woman from the ACLU, the American Communist Lawyers Union, she said, Mr. Hovind's right, these are not correct, but she said, what are you going to replace all this with? I said, excuse me? We can't take a lie out of the book unless I find a replacement. Let me tell you what she's trying not to say, folks. All these lies are used to support her theory of evolution, her religion. And if I remove all the lies, she's left with no evidence for her theory. And so she wants me to find evidence for her theory. I got a better idea. Get a new theory. But the only alternative to evolution so far is creation. And they don't want that. They don't want that so badly they'll believe anything else. So I would encourage you, if you go to public school, watch my video number 4 especially. Watch it 4 or 5 times if you have to. And don't let them get by with any lies. And parents, when your kid brings the book home or the quiz material home, and you see they're teaching one of those lies, throw a temper tantrum. Stop it. It's very simple. The textbook probably has 95% great stuff. Locate the lies and cut the page out of the book. It won't cost the school anything. How many of you would volunteer to help cut the pages out and bring your own scissors?
Amen.
Case closed, right? Or put a disclaimer in the front of the book, hey kid, the information on page 87 is not correct. Fix it. Or glue the pages together. There's all kinds of ways to fix it. You don't have to throw the book away. Just get the lies out of the books. And then what will happen is there's nothing left to support the evolution theory. That's what will happen. It'll collapse of its own weight. That's what I would encourage you to do. Now, kids, you need to watch what they're doing. Now, you kids got an option here. If they're teaching a lie from the textbook, probably the teacher doesn't know. They really think it's probably true. That's what they were taught. Be sweet, be kind, but be firm. Don't let that go on. Now, kids, listen carefully. If you are always talking in class and causing trouble and a goof off and you don't work at your homework, don't tell them you're a Christian, okay? We don't need your help, right? First, be a good student, okay? But you should say, teacher, excuse me. One lady called me one time. She said, a man called me and said his daughter, second grade daughter, came home from school, and the teacher called him and said, sir, your daughter stops me every time I teach evolution. And the guy said, Mr. Hovind, she loves your videotape. She's second grade. She loves your videos. And so the teacher called and said, I'm going to not teach evolution as long as your daughter's in my class. My first thought was, yay. And then I thought, why are we sending second graders off to war? The parents ought to be fixing this. Or the school board. Or some teacher with half a brain say, look, why are we teaching this? This isn't true. Get this out of the book. Anyway, go ahead.
Next question is, how do you know God is real, and what made you realize He is?
I think there's several ways to look at that answer to that question. One is just logic and say, okay, if you're walking through the woods and you find a painting hanging on a tree, you look around, there's nobody there, there's no footprints, you holler, hey, who did this? Nobody answers. But here's the painting hanging on the tree. You're faced with two choices. Somebody painted it. You just can't find him right now, or her. Or it grew out of the tree. Anybody think of a third choice? Somebody painted it, or it's a natural object. Now, all of our common sense tells us these don't grow out of trees. So somebody had to paint it. So the painting itself is proof of a painter. Now, which painter? That's a different story. The creation itself is proof of a creator, whether you ever meet him or not. Just the creation is all we need as evidence. If you're digging through a pile of gravel and you find an arrowhead, isn't it also made out of rock? What do you conclude? Somebody made it. So when you look at creation, whether through a telescope or a microscope, you conclude there must be a creator. Now, which creator? Is it Allah, Buddha, Jehovah? That's a whole different set of arguments. But first, hurdle number one is there has to be a God. Nothing makes sense outside of that. So I think just intuitively you'd say there has to be. Secondly, I would point out that all of humanity seems to have something inside, a conscience, a sense of right and wrong. Where did this come from? When you see the bad guy in the movie finally get it, you say, yeah, he got what he had coming. That's in all of us, okay? It's innate. We want to see evil punished. Do you think that happens in the lion society when they see one of their fellow lions kill a baby zebra? No, they cheer and you clap and let's go help him eat it, They don't have that. Where would a conscience come from without a designer? Why would we have such a thing, which would be counterproductive for society to survive if we were just animals? And that's a whole line of arguments along that train of thought. So, what's the other choice? It made itself, or somebody made it. Okay?
So what system of life had to evolve before a chicken could lay an egg to replace its kind?
Well, which came first, chicken or the egg? The Bible answers that, the chicken. You know why chickens lay eggs? Because if they drop them, they break. So they lay Did you know peacocks do not lay eggs? Anybody know that? Biological fact. Peacocks do not lay eggs. The peahen lays the eggs. The peacock is the male.
Okay. How many living things have come from nothing?
Okay, you got it. I can explain it to you later if you need me to. Go ahead.
How many living things came from nothing in the theory of evolution?
Everything. All of you were squeezed into that little tiny dot, smaller than a period on a page.
All right. Next question is this. In the Bible, it's in Genesis 3 and 4, the Bible talks, God's time is different from man's timeline, as far as one day equaling how many years?
Well, it's true. The Bible's twice, in Psalm 90 and in 1 Peter 2, I think. It says, a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. Those are only two verses that say that. Both of them say 1,000, not million. And both of them are simply pointing out that time doesn't mean anything to God. Okay, we're stuck in time, not God. This is not 2017 in heaven. God's already been to your funeral. Think about that one. Anyway, so there's no time up in heaven. God is outside of time, space, and matter. He created the three of them. Read the question one more time. I got off down the wrong track here.
The question is in reference to Genesis 3 and 4. Is God's time different
God's
from man?
time different.
Man, as God's time is, one day is equal to how many years?
The days of creation have to be 6 normal days for lots of different reasons. One, the clear reading of the Scripture calls it the first day, the second day, the third day. All of Genesis 1 is one sentence. Did my... Oh, okay. I thought maybe my computer... This is the one that we just got out of the... It was broken down. Anyway, in Exodus 20, God wrote on a rock with his finger and said, in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and all that in them is, and he handed that rock to Moses. So clearly the Bible teaches in Exodus 20:11 and Exodus 31:17 and a dozen other places that the creation was 6 days. Secondly, I'd point out, scientifically, God made the plants on day 3. He made the sun on day 4. How long can the plants survive with no sun? Not long. So it has to be normal days. And on day 6, he made the insects, and they pollinate the plants. Or day 5 or 6, whenever the insects were made. So it's the only way it's going to work. It's a 6-day creation. It's not going to work any other way. And God said, I want you to work 6 days and rest 1, because I worked 6 days and rested 1. He wasn't telling them to work 6 million years and finally take a break. He's telling them to work 6 days and rest for 1. Real clear. Okay?
Okay, where was it at here? Just one had gap theory. Could you explain where they're getting their thoughts for the gap theory?
Can we get a chair? I bet I can sit down. One of these, I'll just grab one. I broke my back years ago in a car accident. A friend of mine had a real bad wreck in his car, and 3 years later he married her. But I broke it once, I've had whiplash twice, and I slide on it all the time. Baptists not only believe in backsliding, we practice it. So, number 2, home. I have to get used to the commands on this laptop. The idea that there's a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 the idea is called the gap theory. It is not true. It is, let's see. Don't tell me. That's a section I moved also. I'm redoing a whole new seminar. It's going to be a Christian creation library, sort of. So, sorry, my slides are gone. But if you watch my video 2, I've got a 20-minute answer to that. Back in 1817, 1820, somewhere in there, a guy started teaching that there's a gap between verse 1 and verse 2. And during that gap, Satan fell from heaven and destroyed the creation, and God had to fix it up for 6 days to ruin restoration theory. The problem is, the Bible says very clearly in Ezekiel 28, Lucifer was in Eden until he sinned. Well, Eden wasn't made till day 6. So if Lucifer's in Eden until he sinned, and Eden wasn't made till day 6, then Lucifer did not fall from heaven between verse 1 and verse 2. Plus, you go back to Exodus 20:11, where he said he made it all in 6 days. We know clearly from Ezekiel 28, Lucifer was created. He's not eternal. He's a created being. Probably the angels were created on day 1 or 2. The Bible doesn't say. But we know on day 3, when the dry land appeared, the angels rejoiced when they saw God, the foundations of the earth. So I cover all that on video 2 of my series out there. They're $50 for the whole 18-hour seminar if you want to get one. And you can copy it all you want. Just don't sell it. Okay. One guy in Dallas has the record. He made 41,000 copies of the videos and gives them out to everybody. But people will sit home and watch a video that you will never get to come to church. It's amazing. Great way to witness. So I give a long answer to that. But the gap theory violates all kinds of scriptures. It violates, I think, the clear teaching of Scripture. It's not necessary. God can do it all in 6 days, just like He said. So I don't know if the answer is not sufficient, raise your hand and tell me, give me your arguments for it. No. So the theory wasn't even made up till 1830, after they started teaching the Earth is millions of years old. It was a knee-jerk reaction to a false theory. That's what it was. Okay, go ahead, brother.
Next question. You may have already alluded to this, is in reference to the caveman and the drawings that they find in caves. Do you believe that supports the rule of evolution? And if not, how does it support creation?
No, there have always been people live in caves. There's people today living in caves. I think, and the drawings on the wall would indicate, I mean, what animal does any drawings of any kind? This is obviously a sign of intelligence, and I think there's just people living in caves. You got up in near Chattanooga, Sequoia Caverns, where the Indians used to go in there every summer when it got hot. They'd go live in there because it was too hot. And people draw on caves and walls all the time. That's just normal humans. I think when they got off the flood, off the ark after the flood, they spread out around the world. And they had a devastated planet. You can't go to the hardware store and get a shovel. There are no hardware stores. I mean, they got to start from scratch. So they would probably make stone tools until they can get, find the iron ore and dig it out and melt it down. And, you need to cut the tree down for supper. How long would it take to go from scratch, find the iron ore, melt it down, make an iron axe? Long time. Meanwhile, you got to get supper and live. So there'd be a stone age automatically after Noah's flood. Just by virtue, like Gilligan's Island. Or Tom Hanks on, Castaway, whatever that movie was. That's just necessary to survive. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with availability of raw materials. Okay?
I have one more question. I'm going to get clarification and get to you tomorrow night, but I do have a personal question I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
That I've watched in your videos before, and it's the most compelling, one of the most compelling proofs against evolution, such as the dating through the ice ring layers. And as far as the discoveries that were made and how long those objects, such as the planes that were found, should have been according to that. But the truth is, when those facts actually contradict evolution, we never hear that in the schools. We never hear that in the papers. We never hear that in the museums. It's always sticking to the fact that ice rings, for example, is still proof positive of a way of dating our current Earth. But it's been proven. Through, I guess, maybe accident, that it can't be done. Could you maybe elaborate some on that, please?
Right. I stopped tonight, just before I got into a whole section on scientific ways to prove the Earth is not billions of years old. One of them is the amount of ice at the North and South Pole. I'm trying to fast forward through a bunch of them here about the galaxies, and I thought I had a hyperlink to that, but apparently it's broken with transferring computers here. The moon is leaving us, and the population of humans increasing, and there are, again, at least 30 different ways to prove, probably 100, the Earth can't be billions of years old. The amount of ice at the North and South Pole is one of them that I cover on my video number 1. Let's see. Let me get up here. The magnetic field of the Earth is decreasing. Kids are going to be taught about Pangea, a bunch of baloney. Sahara Desert growing, oil pressure. There we go. Okay. In Denver, north of Denver, Colorado, there's a part of the National Ice Core Laboratory. I'm not sure which branch of the government runs that, but it's a giant freezer, about the size, twice the size of this auditorium. I mean, a freezer. They store the ice cores. There are guys there that go to Greenland and drill holes in the ice and see how thick it is, okay? They got a big machine like an apple core machine, only this thing is thousands of feet long, and they keep adding sections on, and they drill down, pull up the center part, and they save the core in a styrofoam tube and take it back to this freezer to study it. Article says, ancient Antarctic ice studies in Denver lab, Lakewood, Colorado. 10 ice core samples yanked from a remote glacier are resting in a giant freezer waiting to be tested. The ice cores have rings on them, and the textbooks will tell you, kids, in Greenland and Antarctica, where the weather is consistently dry and very cold, the glaciers are miles thick, but the annual rings are very thin. The deepest core is 10,000 feet. And they say this proves 135,000 years ago what the climate was. Well, hold on a minute. They're going to tell you those rings they see in the ice, like tree rings. There's a dark ring, a light ring, a dark ring, and a light ring. And they're calling them annual rings. The story says, in the summer, the top will melt and it refreezes and makes clear ice. But in the winter, the snow just packs and it makes white ice because the air bubbles can't escape. So they're going to tell you they represent summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter, which is what all the textbooks say. Summer, winter, they call them annual rings. Well, there's a bunch of airplanes flew from America to fight the war in Europe, and they got caught in a storm and had to turn back and landed in Greenland. They're called the Lost Squadron. You can Google that. They crash landed in Greenland, ran out of gas. 1942. All the pilots were fine. They finally walked out and went on and fought the war. Well, the airplanes got left behind. So a rich guy in Kentucky got a brilliant idea. Hey, brand new World War II airplanes sitting on the ice. Let's go get them. It wasn't quite that simple. They had to use ground penetrating radar to find them because they were under 263 feet of ice in 48 years. Okay. So they melted a hole down to get to one of the planes, took it apart, and brought the pieces up through the hole and put it back together in Kentucky, called the Glacier Girl. As they melted down to get to the airplane, they went through hundreds of rings. Took the plane apart, brought it up, took it back to Middleborough, Kentucky, right there, reassembled it at the airport. Let's see, the airplanes were in the ground for 48 years. They were 263 feet down. That's 5.5 feet per year. The deepest hole they've ever drilled is 10,000 feet. That would be less than 2,000 years worth of ice. Do the math. Now, deeper layers get squished, I understand. It's called firn, F-I-R-N. So 4,500 years since Noah's flood is no problem to account for all the ice at the South Pole and North Pole. So I went to Middleborough and visited Bob Carden. He's the guy that dug the airplane out. He helped on the restoration process, put it all back together. I said, Bob, when you went down to get the airplane, did you go through ice rings? He said, well, yeah, many hundreds of them. I said, hold it. How could there be hundreds of annual rings in 48 years? Shouldn't there be like 48? He said, those aren't annual rings. Who told you those are annual rings? That's not summer, winter, summer, winter. It's warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold. You can get 5 of those in 1 week. He said while they were digging out the airplane in 9 years it took them to get it, they counted 30 to 40 rings accumulated in 9 years. So kids are going to lie to you and tell you they're annual rings, and they're either lying or they're stupid. But it's not true. Those are not annual rings. They might just be ignorant. That would be okay, because ignorance can be fixed. See, stupid is forever, but ignorance can be fixed. That's the difference, by the way, between the two. One guy said, Brother Hovind, I got 15 layers of snow on my car in 8 hours. 15 layers, not inches, layers. Eskimos have over 40 different words for snow and ice. What else is there to talk about up there? You're also going to be taught that the layers of rock you see in the earth are different layers. The geologic column. Pure baloney. Geologic column does not exist anywhere except in the textbook. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, petrified, connecting all those layers. Now tell me, how long does a petrified tree stand up, or how long does a dead tree stand up in Mississippi before it falls over? 5, 10 years? Petrified tree, and things can petrify quickly. Here's petrified firewood. Here's a petrified fish in the process of giving birth. It does not take millions of years to give birth, praise God. Here's petrified cowboy boot, petrified pickle. I go with petrified peanuts at the Ripley Museum, petrified charcoal briquettes, petrified teddy bear. So I go through all this on my video series about it does not take millions of years for this to happen. So the ice rings at the North and South Pole indicate rapid deposition for a while, and probably less than 4,000 years worth would be the max, which is when the Bible says the flood was. Okay?
Any final closing comments? If not, we'll go to the solution.
Say that again now?
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Any final comments? We'll let you do that at this time.
I still don't understand what you're saying.
If you have any final comments at this time, you can do that.
Oh, final comments. Here's the problem. If the Bible is true, then we're going to stand before God and be judged one day. And you better get ready for that. There will be a test. He's got a record of every word you've ever spoken, every thought you ever thunk. It's all recorded. Everything. That's going to be read back Judgment Day with everybody listening. That's going to be one embarrassing day. There is a way to get the record erased, though. The blood of Jesus Christ. And 48.5 years ago, I said, Lord, I am a sinner. And all the angels hollered, Amen. I said, Lord, I deserve to go to hell. They all hollered, Amen. He's right, Lord. I said, but Lord, I believe you died for me. I'd like you to forgive me and save me. I was 16 years old. I prayed, said, Lord, would you come into my heart and save me? And something changed. I mean, it's like a seed got planted. See, when you plant a seed in the dirt, the seed knows how to make the tree, not the dirt. Dirt is 100% stupid. 100%. Doesn't know nothing. The seed knows how to make the tree. But it can't do the job if the dirt won't let it in. You open up the dirt, drop the seed in, bingo, the magic takes place, and the seed grows the tree in the dirt. When you invite Jesus in, He starts making a new person out of you on the inside. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And so if you're watching, if you're here tonight and you're listening, and you're not sure you're going to heaven, that's what I would encourage you to do, is make today your birthday into God's family. Say, I want to get saved today. And ask the Lord to save you. Write this down as your birthday and go on and start serving God with your life. Every session will be different. My seminar is, like I said, 18 hours long. There's no way I can cover that in 3 meetings here. And I talk as fast as I can go. When they find my jawbone, they're going to think I was a woman. The preacher went to visit the little boy. His dad died. He said, well, son, did your dad have any last words? He said, no, Mom was with him right up to the end. But anyway, we want to help strengthen your faith. I'll answer any questions I can. My YouTube channel, Ken Hovind Official, we do that every night, every weekday night. If you want to watch that, we'll be glad to help. Okay, thank you so much, brother. Tomorrow morning, what time?
Worship starts at 11 a.m.
11 a.m. Just one service in the morning?
One service in the morning.
And then 2 tomorrow night?
We'll have, 5 o'clock, we'll gather again here at 5 o'clock. So we'll be 11 and we'll be here at 5.
Okay.
So invite each and every one of you to here for that. This afternoon, morning, evening, whatever it is, we've all gathered together and we've heard some truths, and the invitation has been out, and I thank you, each and every one of you, for coming here. I do want you to keep one thing in mind. I don't know a whole lot, but one thing I do know is we're all going to die. And when we die, we're going to stand before judgment. And we're going to go one of two places. There's no middle ground. There's no better heaven and no worse hell. We're going to go to a Satan's hell, we're going to go to the paradise of heaven. That's the truth. Maybe tonight God's shown you something. Maybe tonight you came here with a question. Maybe you're atheist. Maybe you're agnostic. Maybe you just don't know. But the one thing I want you to always know, and if you don't know the answer, I pray that God will start speaking to your heart, is do I know if I die today where I would go? If you don't know that, and maybe tonight, because I think anytime we get together in God's house, we need to give God an opportunity to move in somebody's heart. So I'm going to ask everybody if they would right now to stand up. Some of them may take a little longer than